Alright, today we're going to be baking out an ambient occlusion map and a curvature map to be able to go in and detail our textures, or detail our models with textures that lets the computer do a lot of the grunt work for us, like being able to go in and hand paint these little edges of everything would just be very time consuming. Going in and hand painting the shadows of things would be very time consuming. So we can use built-in functions of the Arnold render engine to just do this for us. And this is a very common technique used throughout texturing programs. The first step in doing anything in Substance Painter is going to be to generate your maps, which are going to include ambient occlusion, it's going to include curvature. So that's what we're going to be doing today, so we can apply this kind of grit on this crate. So the first thing we're going to do is stop rendering this. I'm just going to delete these lights, and I'm going to select my object, and I'm just going to right click on it. I'm going to go assign new material. I'm going to come down to Arnold, and I'm going to select ambient occlusion, and that's going to put a new material on my crate. And if I come down and render this out, you can see even without a light, I'm still getting light source from it. That's because the ambient occlusion, if applied as a material, you don't need a light for this to work. So that's all I'm going to do. This looks good. You see all this shadow information. If I wanted to, I could come in the attribute editor and kind of bring the spread down, maybe make it fall off a little bit more. I could play around with these values. I'm just going to leave it as is, and then to bake this with my object selected, I'm just going to come up to Arnold, you come to Utilities, I'm going to go to Render Selection to Texture, and then I'm going to pick out where I want this to go. Go into Source Images, Bakes. So with Arnold, it doesn't matter. You're not going to be able to give it a name, so you just pick where you want it to go and then click Select. And whatever this is named in this outliner is what the exported bake is going to be. So it's going to be crate1 shape.exr. So I'll just come up here and type in 2048, and then that's it. I'm going to hit render, and now it's baking it out. So on my UV map, all of these shadows and all these highlights are going to be baked into my UV map. So we'll just let this play out. And come into here, look at my bakes, and here's my crate1.exr. So Arnold will keep overwriting these, so I'm going to sit here, and the first thing I'm going to do before I go bake out my curvature is say crate underscore AO for ambient occlusion. If you don't do this step, Arnold will keep overwriting whatever you have here. So it'll be crate1 shape overwrite, and so you'll keep going back and forth between your ambient occlusion and your curvature, and it can drive you crazy. So I renamed this, so now when I re-export this curvature map, when it comes out as crate shape 1, it'll, it's not going to overwrite this because I've renamed it. Make sure you do that. So now I'm going to come into my, for the curvature, we can't just apply it as a material, right? If I come over here to my hypershader and select my ambient occlusion, it shows up as its own material, right? So that's why we can apply it, and it works in a different kind of way. But with the curvature, we're going to have to select our object. I'm going to go to Add Existing Material, and I'm going to add this Lambert, this original Lambert that just came with the default material. Then I'll grab this Lambert one, and we'll see this is the input output. I'm going to make this totally white, and then to see what our render is going to be, right, we need a light in there. If I hit play on my Arnold renderer and then hit play, we see that we need a light in here. And I want to add a curvature to this. So I'm going to come down to Arnold and then grab this curvature node and just bring color into color. And when I do that, you can see now it brings up this. You can see what it's doing to my model. It's highlighting the edges, right? And so this is going to be important for when we start texturing it. So I'll just play with these values. Radius is going to grow or decrease it. Threshold is going to apply it to anything that's lower in value between the polygon angle, adjacent angles. The higher this goes, the less it's going to apply to things. The lower this value is, the more it'll be applied to things. I'll bring this radius down to like 0.05, maybe something like that. Maybe bring the spread down to like 0.832. That's looking good, so I'm just going to go with this. So with my objects selected, right, I'm going to come up to Arnold, Utilities, Render Selection to Texture, make this 2048, and then hit Bake. Hit Render, and it'll bake that out. And this will take a little while, but it'll be at 1%, and then all of a sudden it'll go through like that. So now I'm going to come back into my my folder that I've baked these out to, and I'm going to rename this to crate underscore CRV or curve, and then I'm just going to open these up in Photoshop.